I moved up to the Seattle area in '93, and I opened my private practice in this area in '94. And one of my early clients who came to see me was a young man of 25, married. His marriage was in trouble. He was depressed. And over the course of working with him, he kind of opened the window on the internet. I didn't have a computer. I really knew very little about the internet. I didn't understand really video gaming. And so I learned through him. He introduced me to this whole phenomenon. And I was intrigued, and I had a little boy of my own that I didn't want to end up getting in trouble. And I had a pretty clear sense that this was the direction things were moving, and that I wanted to be prepared for it. And so that kind of set me on the path. And then more clients came in with, somebody came in who was addicted to online porn, and somebody else came in who was addicted to day trading and carrying on online affairs, multitasking, carrying on affairs, blogging, writing in a writer's forum, day trading, all at the same time. It was really interesting. And at one point she said to me, "Do you think I could be addicted?" And she was pretty classic. So, it was, what was the common variable? The common variable was the internet. Mm-hmm. So by '99 I had, was starting to be known locally for my specialization in that area. And I met Jay Parker, who's a recovery coach, and he was interested in developing a program for sex addicts and their partners. And we opened a company called Internet and Computer Addiction Services, and we did that work. So I learned a lot more than I already knew about behavioral addictions. Mm-hmm. And was always frustrated that that there was no place appropriate to send our gamers. Mm-hmm. So that's...
Do you feel that the gamers, nowhere to send the gamers, so did you feel that there was a certain level of addiction that wouldn't have to have an inpatient aspect to it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
If you've got somebody who's highly motivated, even if they're severely addicted, but they're highly motivated. In other words, they've reached their bottom, they've hit their rock bottom, and they're highly, highly motivated, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get better. Mm-hmm. I could be successful with them. But if they weren't that highly motivated, if it was parents dragging somebody in or a spouse dragging somebody in who wasn't motivated, then it's really hard to deal with an addiction in someone who's not motivated to change. So anyway, it really helps if people are motivated. But it works so much better if you have something like we've created here, because if you're just away from all aspects of the internet and screens for long enough, your body will detox and you'll have a new perspective. You can sort of experience yourself and your world in quite a different way. And so even if somebody comes here and they're kind of resistant and in denial about needing it, that often changes over the course of being here for 7 or 8 or 9 weeks, So mm-hmm. That's the great beauty of having a program like this, where they can get a lot of psychoeducation and they start getting healthy and physically fit, and they go through detox and all of that. It just makes all of the work that needs to be done to become healthy and in recovery so much easier.
Now, when you say they go through detox, mm-hmm. what does that mean?
Well, it means that their brains, which have had to down-regulate because of being overstimulated in the pleasure centers of the brain, that down-regulation is what we call tolerance. It's like you overstimulate the release of neurochemicals like dopamine and the opiates, and the brain adjusts to that, and by downregulating, and that's tolerance. And then when the person has no access to their source of stimulation, then they go through a period where the brain is upregulating to normal again. And that's called withdrawal. So in the case of behavioral addictions, the brain, what's happening in the brain is similar to the chemical addictions, but chemicals are affecting all the organs of the body, so of course they experience many more physical symptoms than a behavioral addiction person does. And once the brain has upregulated to normal, they start feeling much better. When they're going through detox with the behavioral addiction, they're still feeling pretty lousy. You know, they're depressed and anxious and irritable and restless, which are characteristics of all withdrawal.
Right. So, what do they do that connects them with regular life? I understand that you have them do some chores and things like that. Mm-hmm. So what is it that you're teaching them? What don't they know, a lot of these people that come in, that they've never really had to do these type of things, or do they all know how to mop a floor? I'm not sure what you are trying to accomplish here.
Right. A lot of them have been allowed, really, by their parents to really not function very at a high level. And so they don't know how to cook, they don't know how to shop for food, they don't know how to do their laundry sometimes, you know, and clean the toilet and mop the floor and vacuum the living room. They might know it, but they don't have a habit of it. And they might not even know it. So what we're doing is teaching them skills that they might lack, or reminding them of skills that they may have once had, hoping that those will become habituated over their stay here in the first phase of the program. And our goal is that they'll be really ready to function like independent young adults by the time they move out of here and on into the world, either in our transition program or not. But that's our goal. Mm-hmm. And their skills that they lack are not only life skills, like we were just talking about, but skills of emotion regulation, skills of communication, social skills. Mm-hmm. These are all things that most of them need to learn, and we try to teach.
And how successful are you with a roommate? Do the roommates usually end up being able to get along?
Usually. I mean, once in a while they don't, and so we might have to do some juggling of roommate situations, but for the most part, roommates get along fine.
And social skills, what are you seeing is lacking? What don't they know how to do?
Well, they often don't know how to start a conversation, how to enter a conversation, how to take turns in a conversation.
Okay.
How to keep a conversation going or move a conversation into a new direction that they would find interesting. They often, you know, they can talk endlessly about gaming or, you know, whatever their particular activities were that they did online, but we don't want them talking about gaming. We want them to talk about other things. So we discourage them from talking about gaming unless it's in a therapeutic setting, either their therapy or a group setting where they're really talking about it therapeutically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you said emotional regulation. What's an example of how they are not emotionally regulated?
So it's really typical that the guys who come here, and of course this is just broad strokes, but it's very typical that they are what we call Mr. Nice Guys. there's a wonderful book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And it's really about the Mr. Nice Guy syndrome, which is not being willing to speak up honestly. Like show up in a relationship and say what you really think, you really feel, what you really need or want. And because they are so often afraid of conflict, and so to avoid the conflict, they will acquiesce, they will withdraw, they will say yes, but not do it, and it leads to resentment, which fuels addiction. So that's what we are trying to teach them not to do. So conflict will get them often very upset. The anger gets them upset and they don't really know how to regulate that. Or the pain of, for instance, facing painful dynamics in their family and talking about that, or facing what they did and the shame they feel about what they did. Their fears, their fear, their sorrow, their anger, all of these are difficult emotions, and what their habit is to escape dealing with those difficult emotions through the distraction of their online activities. Take the example of online dating. There is a tremendous anxiety that we all feel when we're learning how to approach somebody we find attractive and we want to develop, we want to date them and get to know them and all of that. It's anxiety provoking. And when you don't have skill at that, it's extremely anxiety provoking. So many of these guys have avoided that challenge entirely, and they don't date. They often haven't dated much. Now some of them have, of course. These are broad strokes, but that would be an example of needing to learn a skill for managing the anxiety of that, or any other getting to know somebody in the real world. Like, it's complicated, learning how to read people's faces, pick up nonverbal body language, and you need practice at it. And these guys haven't been practicing it much because online communication is very different from offline communication, face to face. So all of this is stuff that they need to practice. They need to, develop some confidence around, not only the skills themselves, but the handling all the emotion that comes up in situations where they have to employ those skills.
So it's far more complicated than a very engaging game.
Yes, far more complicated than a very engaging game.
Have you done any psychological studies on who has the likelihood of becoming addicted to a game? I've read like under 10% of people are maybe prone to becoming addicted, or is there anything like that, or any correlations that you've seen at all?
Well, I'm not quite sure what your question is. We know that probably about 10% of the population is getting addicted to gaming, and or maybe some other aspect of the internet, but it probably is averaging around 10%. And in the young adult population, it's more. It's higher numbers. So we do know that it's a problem for a significant part of the population.
And how do you define internet addiction? What symptoms do you see that are like, yes, they have this condition or disorder? I'm not sure what word you use for it.
Well, in the back of the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM-5, they have proposed 9 criteria. So you can look that up.
Okay.
I can't list all 9.
Uh-huh.
And they're saying, well, we're proposing this for internet gaming disorder. And then they want there to be a gathering of research, more than has been gathered so far, to to see if it's going to be included. I'm sure it will be included in the future. Whether or not those are going to be the final 9 criteria, we don't know yet. But basically, all addictions have certain things in common. They engage the pleasure centers of the brain so that the addict feels either great pleasure or a sense of relief when engaged in the activity. And, commonly called a high.
Yeah.
Okay. Or a sense of relief. And then over time, the development of tolerance, because the brain has to downregulate. An experience of withdrawal, if they're cut off, to accessing whatever it is. And once that neurobiological process has happened, they lose control. And that loss of control, so they make efforts, they may make many efforts to stop themselves, and yet the addiction overrides their rational thinking about it. And so they have lost control, and once they've lost control, then they're going to engage in it despite all of its negative consequences. And the negative consequences will be physical and social, consequences in function.
Now, how many of the residents here came in? They were pushed in by parents rather than walking in on their own.
Probably 80%.
Yeah, concerned families or loved ones.
Yeah. Most of these guys have failed out of college, and parents were worried usually before. And then when they send, and the typical thinking of the parent is, I know he overdoes it on the gaming, but once he goes off to college life will be like my college experience. It was so much fun. I knew social life and, interesting and challenging academics, and it'll be great. He'll enjoy it so much. Yeah. And what happens instead is they suddenly find themselves without the parental structure that was there before, keeping a lid on things.
Yeah.
They're faced with the increased stressors of having to create a social life and having rather poor social skills and lacking confidence socially, and increased academic pressure. And the guys who come here are the guys who just retreat from those challenges and hide away and just really jump off the cliff into their addictive behaviors. And then they fail out of college year 1, 2, or 3, sometimes year 4.
Oh, okay.
Or sometimes, on rare occasion, they actually graduate, usually after 6 years or so of trying to get through college, and then even on the other side of college, they're still not being productive, and they can't get jobs, and they're living at home, and things like that.
Okay. Now, are some of this group, is it pretty much all gaming disorder, or are there some porn? Are there a variety of addictions here?
Yeah, there are a variety of addictions. Sometimes porn is usually thrown into the mix for the majority of guys, but it's not their primary addiction for most of them. And if we know their primary addiction is to pornography, we're likely to send them to a different program, because there's some good programs to deal with sex addiction.
Okay.
But if it's a mix, and it's usually a mix, so for the majority it's gaming, for some it's information junkie, it's a variety of things.
Well, the information junkie, I'm curious about that. A friend of mine said, would you ask her whether you can get addicted to your job? Are people walking around addicted to their jobs? And that's where this word addiction gets, I think it kind of gets thrown around.
Loses its meaning.
Yes.
Well, but the thing is, I think that it is the nature of working on computers, like especially if you are... especially if you're like a programmer. First of all, we do know that there's such a thing as workaholism. And and people who are in programming definitely can get addicted to that. And it's because of this thing called intermittent reinforcement. And intermittent reinforcement just means, you're trying and suddenly, it worked. And then, you try some more and, it didn't work. And, sometimes you feel rewarded for what you've just done and sometimes you don't. But computer programming can be very much that way. And so I've talked to a number of programmers who feel that they were addicted. So.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about your website, just really quickly, about virtual reality and augmented reality coming around. Are you worried about it?
Because the more immersive an experience is, the more intense it will be, intensely pleasurable. If you're a gamer and you can be completely immersed in your cyber reality, digital reality, that immersion is going to be releasing more of those neurochemicals than something less immersive. And the same goes like with pornography. If you can wear a bodysuit and be in what feels like a 3D reality, that's more immersive. And that will be, I'm sure, more addictive. The developers of games know very well, and porn know very well, that immersion is the, that's the golden
Ring?
prize that they're seeking.
Immersion. Total immersion, probably. And total engagement. Let's talk a little bit about today's parents, and if you developed any thoughts in your head about some habits the parents could have that with their to teach their kids to avoid addictive behavior in the future.
I'm going to give you, by the way, a copy of my book called Video Games and Your Kids. Okay. And because that's what it's written for parents. And it's really all about how do you, what are the ages and stages of child development, and how do you protect your kid so that they can develop normally in a digital age. So I will
Good. I will do that. You don't have any golden rule that you want to say right now before I read the book? Really, I would like you to talk to newborn parents right now.
Have rules for yourself so that you're giving attention to the child, not to your phone or your tablet. That newborns need tons of attention and contact and interaction with you. Don't be nursing your baby and over here on checking your smartphone, Facebook. Okay? That's not good for your kid. Your kid is needing to connect with you. And so that's what, children need connection. And it's that early attachment which lays the foundation for everything that comes after. And so if the early attachment is good, you're going to have a healthy kid. If your computer use is interfering with that early attachment, and you're handing devices, that is a situation where their attachment needs are actually not getting met. And the mesmerizing effects of screens on young children override their natural instincts to move, to be social. All of these things are getting overridden by the mesmerizing effects of a screen. So it's really important that parents delay for years interactive screens with their kids. And the first 2 years of a child's life, they are going to be best served by no screens whatsoever. And so many parents are now giving their kids cell phones, and I think that's, especially smartphones, and I think that's an enormous mistake. That smartphones are a computer just a small one. And having a young child who's immature walking around with access to the internet is a disaster. So kids, if you want your kid to have a cell phone so that you can contact them and they can contact you, a dumb phone will do fine. A dumb phone without internet access will do just fine. And my advice is that those kids, those teenagers who are begging and saying, you're just the rottenest parent, all my friends have smartphones and I should have one too. Being able to say, I know it's really tough, but I'm not going to be like every other parent. You have to demonstrate maturity. And once I see you as healthy and mature, you've got friends, you've got activities, you're getting your responsibilities taken care of, then we'll talk about it. And if the kid is 15, 16, 17 years old and you say, okay, well, we'll do this now, but it's experimental. Mm-hmm. And if these things begin to falter because of your use, and you can't follow the rules we agree on together that will apply, then it has to go away and you need some more time to mature.
So do you think that parents should spend time doing teaching the skills that you're having to teach here? Mm-hmm. So that would be those. So what are primary skills that parents should be focusing on?
Well, children actually really thrive when they feel that they're making a contribution to the family. So young children need to be given the opportunity to bear responsibilities in the family and doing chores, for instance. They need to be taking care of their schoolwork, like responsibilities before pleasure. I like to think of it as a pie chart. And if you think about 24 hours in a day, what is it that kids need to be healthy? They need plenty of sleep. They need to go to school. They need to be attending to their homework. They need to be spending time with the family, eating healthy food, making sure they get their showers, or probably getting some exercise, and you start filling that in that chart. They need to be moving. They need to be social. How much time is left over? It's not going to be actually very much time. And if you think of it in that pie chart way, then you begin to realize that what ought to be a very narrow wedge of the pie that's actually free time keeps growing and expanding and is squeezing out some of those other things. Mm-hmm. And that's when you know you've got a problem. If you've got a kid who, they've gotten everything done, they've got a well-balanced life, and they've got a little extra time, and they want to play a video game, it's like no big deal. As long as you agree with the content of the video game, which also matters. Mm-hmm. So time and content really matters, and it really matters that kids are engaged with the things that will help them be healthy mm-hmm. and well-balanced.
And finally, because I forgot to ask you this before, what part does nature play here? What has it done for your clients here, and how do you use it?
Well, the research is actually really clear that we are animals that are meant to be embedded in nature. And of course, many of us live lives that don't have a lot of contact, where we don't have a lot of contact with nature. But we thrive when we can have a relationship with nature. So the research again shows that stress levels go down, attention, the ability to attend, mindfulness increases, the brain can relax and think more creatively when people are less stressed, more relaxed out in nature. So we are here in a beautiful and natural setting, and we encourage our guys to be outside as much as we can get them out. And we take them hiking, and in the better weather, we take them camping, usually once a month or once every 6 weeks. So we just do all that we can to help them enjoy and connect to nature. We have staff that will take them and play games with them out in this natural setting, again, to help them connect mm-hmm. and enjoy.
I'm going to check the tape here in just a second, make sure everything's good. But were there any other thoughts? Something I forgot or something important?
Well, I think of it as if you think of internet addiction as kind of a toxin, because it's, you know how medicine, if you overdo, medicine might be fine, but overdone, it becomes toxic. And there are many things like that are okay in small doses, but become toxic in too high a dose. So I think of the internet for the most part that way. And so I feel like you have to think in terms of what's the antidote to having been kind of poisoned by too much time and very antisocial content and that kind of thing on the internet. So nature is one of the antidotes. Physical activity is another antidote. So we have a vigorous fitness program here. Safe social activity is an antidote. And so here is an intimate, safe social setting. Plenty of sleep, healthy food, building skills that help you feel confident and competent. All of these things are antidotes. And so that's what we're trying to provide here. As well as psychotherapy, to just understand and address whatever deep issues might need to be addressed that we haven't really talked about, but are there as well for many of these guys.
Mm-hmm. So the addiction is sort of masked some of these things, or it's a kind of a chicken or the egg?
Totally a chicken and the egg.
Okay.
Yeah, they all come in depressed and anxious. For the vast majority of them, the depression lifts and the anxiety reduces just through this experience. All these antidotes work their magic. Mm-hmm. But always, once you can stop an addictive pattern, and then whatever else is there starts coming up. So there's grief that comes up over their own behavior. There's grief or a variety of feelings that will often come up because family dynamics often have not been good. And sometimes the poor family dynamics came first, but sometimes the poor family dynamics are the result of this problem. Sometimes there's very real trauma that has occurred. So, but we get to unpack all of that and look at all of that and deal with all of that once all of the distraction of the addiction can be set aside.